I'm always worried about people clapping at this end of the presentation because the material's really not that good. No, it will be, I promise. You've got me for half an hour and that's my best joke, so, laugh it up a little bit more. My name's Stefan. I am the author of Business Networking for Dummies, as well as a couple of other books on networking, Instant Networking and Win the Room as well. And there's a couple of problems, aren't there? There's a couple of problems which I'm going to talk about this morning, because there might be, and there probably is, someone in the room who would really, really benefit from your service, your product. There might be people in the room who would absolutely thank you for introducing your product or service to them. And I make a lot of sales at networking events and through social media, so I know that those people are out there. And yet the second problem is this, and it's not a trick question. When you came here this morning, when you came to this event, or when you go to any other networking event, whose benefit did you go there for the sake of, or whose benefit did you come here for the sake of? Yeah, I love asking that question, because there's always about a 1.5 seconds delay, because people sit in the audience and think, yeah, he's being clever, he's going to talk about networking, he's going to talk about looking after the other people or referrals, and then someone in the pink top just there is brave enough to say, I came here for the sake of my business this morning. So we've got an issue, because people go to networking events for the sake of their business. They didn't come to a networking event for the sake of your business. Sorry to break it to you. So we have to work out how to start those conversations with people, how to continue those conversations, how to identify the people that might want to buy from us, and how to take that conversation further so that they do. And I got pretty good at that along the way. When I finally stepped away from estate agency on May 30th, 2007, I'm not bitter about it. Sorry, that was a side conversation in the break. And when I started my own business, more by accident than by design, I realized that I had to find clients. And I'd been to a few networking events before, but all of a sudden, I absolutely had to make this work. Because when I started my own business, I was no longer going to networking events as an employee who was getting a salary, whether or not I made any sales. I was going as a self-employed person, a eat what you kill business. I absolutely had to make sales to stay in business. So I learned pretty early on how to turn this round and how to make sales. And then in 2012, someone asked me if I'd write Business Networking for Dummies, and that's how that came about. So that's what we're going to talk about this morning, how to use events like this, as well as your social media, to help actually win business. Does that make a little bit of sense? If I ask a question, typically the answer is yes, Steph. I don't make it particularly difficult for you. So I really, really hope that makes sense. But I'm Stefan. I talk about networking. This is my actual job. I write books about networking. I run some training programs on networking as well, and I speak for quite a lot of organizations around the place. I'm lucky enough to speak for BT and Lloyds Bank and Utility Warehouse and hashtag events. They're on the slide as well. Every single one of those came from a conversation at a networking event. So I don't just talk about this stuff as theory, I still do this myself. When we were driving here this morning, we came from Oxford, that's where I live, so I had about a 2.5 hour drive down here this morning. They told me I'd get no sympathy from you lot, they really did. That really was the best joke, actually, so I'll keep that one going. But when we were coming down here this morning, and I was thinking about, why do I still do this? Where are we now? 18 years, nearly 19 years since I first started going networking. Why do I still keep turning up for networking events? Because I am lucky enough to have this sort of clients, but the reality is that every big opportunity starts with a little conversation. And these genuinely are the events where I've started those little conversations that have turned into big opportunities. Outside of talking about networking, this is me in real life. I'm Stefan, I'm married to Sharon, who's at the back of the room filming. We've got 5 children between us. We got married 4 years ago. Joe and Fran and George and Miles and Patch are our children. Joe and George and Patch are effectively mine, and Fran and Miles are my stepchildren. And outside of doing this for a living, I go to a few too many punk gigs for a man of my age, frankly. The picture is of me at Dropkick Murphys back in 2020. Is there anyone in the room who's heard of Dropkick Murphys? Oh, we're doing better than, like, quite a lot better than usual. My last gig 3 weeks ago was Skunk Anansie in Oxford. Usually a few more people have heard of Skunk Anansie, but that's what I do in real life, outside of working. And I am a frustrated rock star. A couple of my children are actually musical. I never have been. So I do get to stand on stage and actually speak for a living, even though I can't play music. My one rider, which #events have agreed to for me to be here, is that even though I'm not playing music, I am allowed to do a stage dive later on. You two might want to, like, brace yourself at the end of this. Yeah, that's me. I stand on stage and speak because I've got no musical talent at all. This is where it all started for me. What we're going to talk about quite a lot today is trust. What we're going to talk about, which I was taught back in 1983 when I started working for Manfield Shoes in Cornmarket Street in Oxford. I'm from Oxfordshire. We were taught about building rapport with people. I know Stephen asked earlier, some of you actually go to networking events, do you? Some of you go to like formal networking events? Have some of you, stick your hands up if you have some of you heard the expression know, like, and trust? Yeah, in networking, or meet, like, know, trust, depending on which flavour of networking you go to. But that process, after we've met someone, when we get to know them and they get to know us, when they decide whether they like us and they decide whether they trust us, those two things are really important because they are decisions. We decide who we like, we decide who we trust, other people are exactly the same. But this process, I was taught back in about 1983, we were taught about building rapport, but if you've ever wondered why they have people working in shoe shops, it's so that they can upsell you Scotchgard at the end of it. That was my job. True story. You go into a shoe shop because you're pretty interested in buying a pair of shoes, right? So you're likely to walk out with a pair of shoes as long as you can find the right style, the right size. So the job of the shop assistant is to upsell you at the end. So we had 20 minutes after someone came into the shop to build that rapport so that at the end of it, when we offered them a £1.99 tin of Scotchgard alongside their £19.99 pair of shoes, it was the 1980s, that they would most likely buy it from us. I got really good at building rapport with people. I was a teenager with a social life. We didn't get paid commission in the shop, but the person who sold the most Scotchgard every Saturday was allowed to go home half an hour early. I lived in a small village. The bus from Oxford to our village left at 39 minutes past the hour. So if I finished work at 6 as normal, I would wait 39 minutes, get the bus, be home just after 7 o'clock. If I sold the most Scotchgard and polish and laces and everything on a Saturday, I would be allowed out at 5:30, run down to the bus stop, get the bus at 5:39, be home a whole hour earlier. Can you imagine how important that was for a teenager with a social life? I learned to get really good at selling Scotchgard. We had 20 minutes to go through the know, like, and trust, to build that rapport with people so that they trusted us enough to buy. From 1988 through to 2007, I was an estate agent, and that's what I did since leaving school right up until 2007. You're very polite, thank you. I was an estate agent for 20 years. We had to build rapport with people in an hour. So if we were invited in to do a valuation, we would have about an hour inside someone's house to build that rapport, to build that trust, so that they would trust us with their biggest asset, with their house for sale. The great thing is about networking, the great thing is about social media, that you've got almost unlimited time to build that rapport with people, to build that trust with people. After you've met someone at an event like this, you've got every opportunity to keep in touch with them. But trust isn't binary. Trust isn't a light switch. I'll explain. For someone to buy a £10 book from me takes a very small amount of trust. That's broadly how much the books are on Amazon. For someone to buy a £99 course from me takes a little bit more trust. For someone to put me on stage at their annual conference, where they only get one chance a year to get their message across to their employees in the case of BT, or their members in the case of the Chartered Institute of Management Accountants, that's a shed load more trust, right? And I don't know what all of you do for a living yet. I haven't had a chance to talk to you. But if you're a financial advisor, someone giving you their finances to look after is a whole load of trust. If you're an accountant looking after people's businesses' finances, that's a shed load of trust. What a graphic designer looking after someone's brand identity. Trust isn't binary. It's not just on or off. So building the trust is constant, and starting it at the right moment is constant as well. And none of this is about persuading people. It's about giving people enough information so that they can make the decision for themselves. Because every big opportunity starts with a little conversation. You might hear me saying that once or twice during the morning. Every big opportunity starts with a little conversation. What so many of us get wrong at networking events is that we try and start the conversation too big. Very often at networking events, we feel like the right thing to do is to meet someone and immediately start telling them about why they should buy our products, why they should buy our services. You wouldn't do it anywhere else in real life. So why, when we put a networking label around it, do we think it's okay to just go up and start selling to someone straight away? Every big opportunity starts with a little conversation. The other person in this photo is a guy called Wes Linden. Wes is national network leader for Utility Warehouse, the discount club. They sell gas and electric and phones on a pretty large scale, pretty massive scale. And when Wes and I first met, we met on Twitter. We started by talking about postcards. Wes spotted me having a conversation with someone else. The conversation that I was having was that I use an app on my phone to send a postcard to my grandmother every week. I'm 55. You can probably work out that my grandmother is of an age where she doesn't do social media. So instead of her spotting where I am on Facebook, I use an app so that she actually gets a postcard through her door every week or so. And Wes was really interested in this. So we talked about postcards. And then a few weeks later, we met for coffee and we talked about stuff. We talked about Wes's life. We talked about my life. We talked about the fact that we'd sort of been aware of each other's existence for a few years. But we talked about stuff. And when the time was right, when the tipping point arrived, Wes then came and asked me if I'd be interested in speaking at his event, his kickoff event with 2,500 people. That's me on stage at it. And he also said to me, why did you never pitch about being a speaker for me? And I said, well, we were getting to know each other. You know I'm a speaker. You know that's what I do. And Wes said, but within seconds of any other conversation with any other professional speaker, they'd started asking him when they could speak at his events. Because Wes does events across Europe. His events are amazing. Every big opportunity starts with a little conversation. Our conversation started really little, just a bit like humans, just a bit like the way that we normally talk. And when the big opportunity arose, we'd built up that like, we'd built up that trust so that it came. I've gone on to speak with Wes across Europe on various stages. Him and I wrote a book together, but we started those big opportunities with a very little conversation. When I go to networking events and I'm meeting people for the first time, I very often, well, I usually talk about where are the toilets if I've had a long drive, or where's the coffee, or where do you park, or whatever it happens to be. Be more human in your conversations with people. We don't have to just talk about business because we're at a business event. I've already established that less than a handful of people in the room have heard of Dropkick Murphys. A few more people in the room are into Skunk Anansie. We've got something a little bit in common, but the conversation started on a human level. Every big opportunity starts with a little conversation. The networking event itself can be the start of the conversation, But what so many people try and do is have the whole of the conversation within the event. Hello, nice to meet you. Would you like to buy from me? I'm sort of shortening it for comedy effect. And I was expecting a better laugh, if I'm honest, but I'm sort of shortening it for comedy effect. But that's what we do, right? And we don't need to do it. We've got so much opportunity to start the conversation and then continue the conversation after the event. When you deliver, let me ask the question first. How many of you go to the sort of networking events where you deliver a 60-second introduction or something like that? Stick your hands up if you do. That's okay. You sometimes do. Okay. Are you all aware that networking events exist where you do a 60-second introduction? I'm going to go off on a slight tangent, but there's a point. The very first networking event I went to, Witney Big Breakfast at the Fleece Hotel in Witney, nobody told me about the 60-second introduction. This is not what I do naturally. Standing up in front of people and speaking is something that I've learned to do. At my very first networking event, the idea of standing up in front of a group full of people and talking about my business, particularly with no notice, was absolutely terrifying for me. Nobody told me about the 60 seconds. As I was sat there, I was sat next to a guy called Jamie McIntyre. Jamie sold light bulbs and batteries for a living. I wondered why no one else had sat next to him because he was such a nice guy. And as the 60 seconds started, and I started to get sweaty, my voice went dry, as the 60 seconds started, it really became apparent to me that everyone else in the room knew each other. And they all knew their 60 seconds, and there were some in-jokes, and people were getting more and more confident as the room warmed up. And when it got to Jamie, who sat next to me, and I remember this so very vividly, and apologies to the people on the front row, Jamie stood up at the event and said, "I'm Jamie McIntyre from Abacus Light Bulbs and Batteries. I will beat any price you're paying for your light bulbs and batteries. Tell me what you're paying and I'll beat that price. In fact, lie to me about what you're paying for your light bulbs and batteries and I will beat that price too." And everyone else in the room looked at me and said, "Follow that then." That was my very first ever networking event. But you remember what you told me a few moments ago, that when you go to a networking event, you go there for the benefit of your business, not the other people in the room. So it's really interesting to me that when we stand up and do our 60 seconds, we talk about something that's only of interest to one person in the room, ourselves. If you're asked to do a 60 seconds at a networking event and you're not sat next to Jamie, make sure that you use your 60 seconds to start the conversation. Give people enough that they want to find out more, and don't tell them so much that they think, "Great, tick, I know what they do, I don't need to talk to them." Think of your 60 seconds as the start of the conversation. Think about what the people in the room are buying rather than what you're selling, because we often make that mistake. I help people sell more stuff. Well, the truth is that I run a load of programs and courses and so on, but if I start talking about that before you're interested, you're literally not interested. Think about what the people in the room are buying. Think about giving them enough that they want to find out more and not so much that they think they already know you. The networking event is only the start of the conversation. I mentioned something about tipping points just now. If you think about it, you might meet someone today and you absolutely love what they've got to do. You just don't need it. You've not got the budget for it this quarter. You've already got another supplier. But there might come a tipping point. There might come a tipping point when they fall out with their supplier, or next quarter they've got the budget, or the penny just drops for them and they decide that you're the right person for them to deal with. What most people do after networking events is not keep in touch with the people they've met at all. Sometimes, if someone expresses interest in buying from them, they might follow up with them, and you absolutely should. If you meet someone at a networking event, and there was someone earlier on, someone over there said, looking for people who haven't organised their Christmas event yet, and someone over there said, oh, I need to speak to you, can you make absolutely sure that you follow up on that lead like straight away? If someone expresses interest in what you do at an event like this, you owe it to yourself, your business partners, your mortgage, whoever it happens to be, to follow up with them straight away. And some people do that. It's what I call actively following up. The people who express interest in buying from you. Because I'm not a mind reader, but let me promise a couple of things that will happen to you as soon as you leave this room. You'll have had a conversation and you'll think, oh, they're a great person. I could book their venue for our Christmas party. And then you take your phone off silent and you've got a couple of missed calls from a client, or you've got an email that you've got to deal with, or you've left it a little bit late, you're running late for your next appointment, and that great conversation that you had with someone just slips down your list of priorities. It's what we call the half-life of enthusiasm. Someone might hear what you've got to say. I'm glad someone over there liked that. The half-life of enthusiasm, I'll say it again, try and get more of an applause or something. But the half-life of enthusiasm, someone might like what you've got to say then, in that context, when they're thinking about it. By the time they're out in the car park and they've got 2 missed calls from one of their kids to say they've lost their bus money or whatever, it's slipped down their list of priorities. By the time they're back in their office and dealing with emails, it's further down the list. By next week, they've forgotten that they spoke to you at all. If someone shows interest in buying what you're selling, the half-life of enthusiasm, follow up with them as soon as possible. And for God's sake, most of us in 2025 carry our diaries around in our pockets all the time. Get the second conversation booked with someone. Remember that a networking event is only a gateway to a real conversation. If someone's actually interested in what you do, get the real conversation booked in as soon as possible. One-to-one on the phone or on Zoom or face-to-face. I'm going to say it a few times during this. Make it as simple as possible for people to buy from you. You all carry your diaries around in your pocket now anyway. But here's the thing. Actively follow up with the people who express an interest in buying from you. But what about the rest? What about everyone that you meet at networking events who isn't interested right now? Because that will be most people, right? Most people that you come across don't need a financial advisor, don't need a venue, don't need an accountant right now. But they might do in some point in the future. So keeping in touch with those people is vital. And in 2025, and since 2008, we've got all of the tools at our disposal to keep in touch with people at scale, because we have Facebook and LinkedIn and TikTok and Instagram and Threads and Medium and all of the other platforms that are out there. By the way, if we're not connected, please do follow me on either Facebook or LinkedIn. Very happy to have new connections, and I put a ton of networking advice out there as well. But with all of this opportunity to keep in touch with people at scale, the biggest opportunity is that most people won't bother. The biggest opportunity is that you've got the option to be front of mind in front of people when they actually think about buying a service similar to yours. And most people might bother to keep in touch with people who express interest in buying from them. Hardly anyone keeps in touch with the rest. And this is what makes my business and the people that I've worked with exponential. Because what happens is that you have some people who want to buy from you straight away, and some people who it takes months or years to get the budget or to work it out. But then you've got the people who you're meeting who think, great, that's for me, I'll buy that. And then you've got the people who you've known for 7, 8, 15 years, for whom the penny drops. That's what starts to make your sales exponential. Because you can connect with and keep in touch with pretty much unlimited people in 2025 through social media. So actively follow up with the people who've expressed interest in buying from you, and make absolutely sure that you keep in touch with everyone else, all of the other people that you meet, because you've got the opportunity to do so. It's all there. Sam Rathling, who is amazing, is going to talk about LinkedIn a little bit later. And I'm not going to steal Sam's thunder at all, because she's amazing and fab and talks about LinkedIn and writes books about LinkedIn a lot. But I use LinkedIn and Facebook and Instagram and TikTok slightly differently to how people expect, because most of my activity is commenting on other people's posts. Every post on LinkedIn, Facebook, TikTok, Instagram is a mini networking event that you're invited to. I post a lot. I post several times a day across multiple platforms. But just think about the logic of this. If I post now, none of you are going to see it because you're all here. If I post and you're at your computer, at your phone, whatever it happens to be, I'm completely beholden to the algorithm, which very few of us understand, as to whether you get to see it or not. Because Facebook and LinkedIn decide on a tiny proportion of your followers who will actually get to see your posts. So if I post something, I'm completely beholden to factors outside my control as to whether you see it. If I comment on your post, you're going to see it. If I comment on your post, you're going to notice that Stephen Thomas has commented. Every post is a networking event that you're invited to. The screen grab on this slide is when I presented for BT, and we were talking about how to find people that were interested in the digital switchover, and I literally went live onto LinkedIn, searched the words digital switchover, and found businesses that were talking about it, that they could go and interact on their posts if they wanted to. When I got to speak for Lloyds Bank, I met the head of professional practices from Lloyds Bank at an event just like this. We got talking at an event just like this. When he came to organise his sales conference 18 months later, when I met him, it was too close to the next sales conference. He had the speakers booked. But when he came to organising his next one 18 months later, he said, well, I couldn't ignore you, could I? Because every time I went on LinkedIn, up there in the top right-hand corner, I had a notification to say, Stephen Thomas has liked, Stephen Thomas has commented, Stephen Thomas has shared one of your posts. Instead of emailing him every week and saying, hi Paul, can I come and speak at your event? I was subtly reminding him that I existed. And if you think about it, I was going to him. I was going onto his posts, onto his turf, rather than expecting him to come to me. I couldn't ignore you, could I? And at the same time, I commented on his posts. You think about how delighted you are when someone comments on your posts. I'd actually done him a favour, I'd been interested in him, and it led to a whole load of business for me. And I still get to talk about the fact that I've spoken for Lloyds Bank, which I'm rightly proud of. The best book that was ever written about social media was written in 1937 by a guy called Dale Carnegie. The book is called How to Win Friends and Influence People. If you've never read that book, I strongly suggest you do. I've still got my copy from 1989. If you buy it from Amazon, please remember that other books are available. Genuinely the best joke, or at least the best last one. But what Dale Carnegie says in that book is that you'll win more friends in 2 months by being interested in them than you will in 2 years by trying to get them interested in you. And yet the question which most people ask me about networking, and the question which most people ask me about social media is, what should I say, what should I post? And people are interested in their own stuff first, right? So if you go and genuinely show interest in other people, some of those people will come back and show interest in you. It's not a one-to-one thing, right? Just because I show an interest in your post, it doesn't mean that you'll automatically come back and be interested in me. But when you do it at scale and show interest in a lot of people, some of those people come back and start being interested in you. And then there's a little question is, what are you giving them to look at when they come back and show interest in you? That guy's called Gary Vaynerchuk. He writes a lot of books about social media. And he came up with the expression, the authority of content. If you want to be seen as the expert, the authority on what you do, your opportunity is absolutely there. I am talking about networking and social media more than most people around me. So I start to become the authority of content. If you search networking, you'll probably find an article that I wrote somewhere. And this works, right? I spoke 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago for a company called Oxford Innovation. I spoke at one of their innovation centres around the country. That was actually quite well paid. It was a really good gig. I've come away with other clients from it. They found me because they searched for who was writing about business networking. We'd never connected before 2025. They found me through an article that I'd written somewhere, found that I was a speaker and booked me to speak at their event. I've probably got 7 or 8, I've never counted, but certainly 7 or 8,000 articles out there that I've written about business networking over the years, as well as videos of me speaking, as well as TikToks and Reels and so on. So guess what? It's likely that I'll get found. So if someone comes back and pays attention to me, I've written a lot about networking. People can make up their own mind whether I know what I'm talking about, because they can actually see me out there. They can see videos of me speaking. They can see videos of me speaking on stage. I also do quite a lot of stuff direct to camera. I write quite a lot of stuff. But they can decide whether they like me, trust me, whether I'm the right person to appear on stage for them. If you think about that as well, if someone comes and looks at me and finds a ton of content, and then the other speaker or the other trainer that they've been recommended, there's 0 content, am I making it more or less likely that they're going to book me? Of course it's more likely. I've had clients say to me, they booked me because they felt they already knew me. And I don't care what business you're in, but if someone already feels they know you before the first conversation, before you first speak to them, you're a long way forward in the know, like, and trust than someone who's got 0 digital footprint. So go out and be interested in other people, but make sure that you give them something to look at when they come and look at you. Effort is currency in 2025. You have all got the opportunity to put content out there about your business, and the real opportunity is that most people won't bother, which is fine. You don't have to do much more than your competition to be significantly more visible. If you think about how people work, they might meet you at a networking event, and they might think, oh, that sounds interesting, I'm going to go and check them out online. Are you giving them something to look at? Are you giving them something to check out, or nothing? This stuff all joins up, right? Meet people at networking events or social media. Keep the conversation going with them. Become the authority of content. By the way, I'm never going to be the #1 authority of content on networking. Dr. Ivan Meisner, who founded BNI, when I last checked, he'd written 37 books on networking. I've written 3. So he's a long way ahead of me. But I don't mind being number 549th authority on business networking, or wherever I am on the scale, probably 2000 and something. It doesn't matter. Being out there, showing people your expertise, what you talk about, will help you to find your tribe, will help you to find the right people who want to do business with you. Coming up to the last couple of points. Please don't ever judge the people in the room. People go to networking events, and they actually do it with me quite a lot, and I quite enjoy it these days. I see people at networking events thinking, okay, weird middle-aged punk guy at the front, okay, there's someone in a suit at the back, I'm going to go and, they must be better, I'm going to go and talk to them instead. I went to a networking event in Abergavenny in South Wales in about 2009. And I met Kathy, who was at the time a self-employed HR consultant. Kathy Osborne. Ended up doing a lot of work with Kathy, helping her write her emails and so on for her HR consultancy. And after about 6 months, Kathy picked up the phone to me and said, look, I've tried this self-employment thing, but it's not working for me. And she wanted to go back to her first love, which was HR director for retail companies. Prior to being a self-employed HR consultant, Kathy had been operations director for Next. Prior to that, she had been HR director for Hamleys, and she went back into high street fashion retail and become HR director for quite a big company. And I'd lost a client, so that was rubbish. But about 6 months after that, Kathy picked up the phone. She was HR director for Barrett's Shoes at the time. Back in the 1980s through to the 2010s, Barrett's Shoes had shops on every high street. And she said, look, we need some training done, and I think you'd be the right person to do it. You used to work in a shoe shop when you were a kid. You talk their language, and I think you'd be right. And I ended up doing 2 years worth of training for Barrett's and spoke at their managers conference, and that was very lovely and very lucrative. It was my first big client. So I announced all over social media, I'm doing training for Barrett's Shoes PLC. Here I am in Yorkshire at Barrett's head office. And a guy called Peter got in touch with me, who sold water coolers at the time. And Peter said, can you introduce me to Kathy? Peter's based in Abergavenny, South Wales. He was at the same networking event that I was at when I met Kathy. And Peter, when Kathy had gone and started talking to him, had actually said, thank you, but I only deal with people with like staff and premises and that, so thank you, but I'm going to go and talk to them instead. Peter had literally done that palm thing. I don't want to talk to you, you're too small. I'm going to go and talk to this person who I think is bigger. So I didn't need to introduce Peter to Kathy. He'd already met her, but he'd absolutely blown it on the first occasion, the first conversation. Never judge the other people in the room. You never know who they used to be. The general manager of the Guild of Professional Estate Agents with 750 independent estate agency offices around the UK. That was me, 2000 to 2003. You never know who people might be connected to right now. You never know who they might go on to become in the future. But more to the point, right? Just being more human. Having conversations with people absolutely rocks. You never know where it might go. But judging people because of what it says on their badge, or because you think that they've not got enough pound notes above their head, really isn't the way forward in networking. Do everything you can so that when people judge you, they judge you positively, but don't judge the other people in the room. Some of my biggest opportunities have come from the smallest conversations along the way. This is something that we're really rubbish at in England, particularly. When you've done all of this, particularly if you're a small business, remember to show people the till. If you go into any fashion retailer, I know it's Boots, but it's the best photo I could get. If you go into any fashion retailer, if you go into Primark, up on the ceiling it says, please stay here. If you go into B&M, you can't leave with, or IKEA, you can't leave without going through the tills. But when we're small businesses, sometimes we get a bit icky about doing that bit and about actually saying to someone, okay then, so would you like to go ahead? Would you like to buy from me? If you're going to do all of this other work, train yourself up in sales skills. Get good at it, because it will make the difference between whether you start winning clients or whether you don't. Remember to show people the till. So many small business owners particularly don't like doing that. Big retailers are really good at it. Think about what this makes possible, right? You're going to hear from some really amazing speakers today. You've taken some time out of your business, your job, whatever it happens to be here. But none of that matters, because you could sit here all day and not do anything different this afternoon or tomorrow, and this day out of your diary today would have made zero difference at all. So think about, what does this make possible? What have you learned today that you can put into practice tomorrow? Because the half-life of enthusiasm applies to that as well, right? In a week's time, you'll have forgotten about some of this stuff. So what you do remember, put it into action as soon as you possibly can. Think about what this makes possible, because the real opportunity is that most people don't. The real opportunity is that most people won't bother. I'm reiterating that because when I started this journey back in 2007, I was going to 4 networking events a week because I wanted to get good at it. When I first learned about Twitter in the beginning of 2008, I decided that this social media thing was going to be big for business, so I decided to get good at it. I put a lot of effort into it. When I was asked to write Business Networking for Dummies, someone said to me, and it's still on my Facebook, oh, so you were just in the right place at the right time. But he wasn't there, right? And he could have been. It was an event just like this, where I met the publishers of the Dummies books. I was there. The opportunity was that I had bothered to do it. The real opportunity is that most people won't bother. You only need to do a little bit more than your competition. So go off and do it. Thank you all very much for listening. Thank you.